Adjourn. Caroline Voaden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity to raise this evening a matter of profound importance to thousands of people from across the country, including many of my constituents living and working near one of the most beautiful and vulnerable coastlines in England. And that issue is coastal erosion, or more specifically, what happens when human-built infrastructure, such as roads and homes, collapse and fall into the sea, or are damaged beyond repair by the intensity of storms, waves, wind and tide. This is not just an infrastructure problem, it is a human one. And the psychological toll of what is happening in these isolated shoreline communities and the threat of what might happen to others in the future should not be underestimated. To set the scene, Start Bay is one of South Devon's most stunning stretches of coastline. 15 miles of cliffs and shingle beaches, running from Warren Point near Dartmouth in the north to Start Point in the south, taking in the villages of Stoke Fleming, Street, Tallcross, B Sands and Hall Sands. The Slapton Line, the narrow shingle bar that carries the A379 and separates the freshwater Slapton Lay from the open sea, is one of the most remarkable and fragile landforms in this country. The A379 itself is a vital link road between the towns of Dartmouth and Kingsbridge. Alongside it lies Slapton Lay, the largest natural freshwater lake in southwest England, a site of special scientific interest and a national nature reserve of enormous ecological importance, home to rare wildlife and a place of outstanding natural beauty that draws visitors from across the world. The area carries another layer of history that many across the world hold dear. In the autumn of 1943, the area was requisitioned by the British government and residents evacuated so that American forces could use the land to train for the D-Day landings. Exercise Tiger cost the lives of nearly 800 American servicemen, a tragedy long kept secret. But the bond still runs deep and many Americans come regularly to visit. Alongside that history is a long and ongoing battle with the sea. In 1917, the thriving fishing village of Hall Sands nearby was almost entirely lost to the sea in a storm, not long after hundreds of thousands of tons of shingle were dredged from the bay to help build the dockyards in Plymouth. And in recent years, the storms have come harder and more frequently. This winter brought a succession of severe weather events that battered the Start Bay coastline with extraordinary force. Properties in Tallcross suffered significant damage. Businesses that depend on the summer season found themselves counting the cost of repairs before the year had even begun. And then, on the night of the 2nd of February, came the collapse of the A379 and a battering to homes behind the sea wall. Windows smashed, roofs lifted, water and shingle pouring into homes. Huge slabs of tarmac fell into the sea and one section of the road collapsed entirely. A once picturesque stretch of coastline looked like a bomb site. It was not a surprise to people who know this coast. The road has long been acknowledged as vulnerable, but the speed and the scale of what happened shocked even those who had been warning about it for years. The alternative inland route is completely inadequate and needs an urgent upgrade. I have been contacted by hundreds of residents and businesses over the past 7 weeks, and 40,000 people signed a petition. Such is the concern. Locally, the impact on daily life has been severe. Travel times to work and school have increased substantially. Journeys that once took just minutes now take far longer via inland diversion routes that were never designed to carry this volume of traffic. Bus routes have been cut or diverted. Older residents and young people trying to get to school and college have found themselves effectively cut off, and everybody dreads the arrival of the caravans. Access for emergency services is a significant concern. Mr. Starr of Tallcross told me his wife required urgent medical attention twice last year. He said on both occasions the ambulance came across the A379 and therefore responded to the call within 30 minutes before taking her to hospital. We are now living in fear that an ambulance will not be able to respond quickly enough. For others, the partial closure of the A379 is a barrier to education due to increased journey times and altered bus services. And this is true for pupils as well as staff at local schools. For local businesses, the consequences have been equally serious. Reduced footfall, cancelled bookings, and the sheer visual impact of a collapsed coastline on what should be a thriving tourism destination has cost businesses dearly at a time when many were already operating on very thin margins. The Tallcross Boathouse Cafe has suffered substantial damage and remains closed. owners Katie and Rob told me, "We won't reopen for several months while the insurance is sorted out. It's been a huge blow and our business has been devastated." In the weeks after the A379 was breached, one local pub reported trade being down by 80%. Other businesses highlighted the impact on their staff of a longer commute and issues with receiving deliveries. Matt Dark, who farms land on either side of Slapton, tells me that travelling between sites is now taking an hour longer every day than it used to. And even the viability of a local health centre is now at risk as patients are choosing to move their prescriptions elsewhere. Besides the damage to the A379, there's also been a serious impact to properties in the village of Tor Cross. The seawall that protects the village has been left exposed by the recent loss of shingle along the beach, resulting in severe wave damage to homes and businesses and ongoing concerns about the stability of the buildings. Residents are scared and struggling to sleep due to the constant vibrations caused by the loss of shingle around the footings of the sea defences, which is an Environment Agency asset. The local EA team have been fantastic, working at pace to progress the case for an urgent project to install remedial rock armour in front of the sea wall. And while approval for the project is not guaranteed, the local team hope the EA will find the funding to support Tor Cross, and I look forward to receiving an update on this soon. However, there will still be the question of what could and should be done to prevent outflanking where the Environment Agency's assets end. There is a huge cost to works like this, and there is always a cost-benefit argument to be won, which is what we will all try to do for Tor Cross. But what is never easy to factor into such an equation is the cost of doing nothing. What does it really cost to leave a village to fall into the sea? What is the cost to people's health and health services? The cost to the wider community, to the social fabric of a very place like this when defences are not maintained. Places like Tor Cross and B Sands are more than just houses. They are destinations, lifelines for people looking for an escape from the demands of daily life, a magnetic draw with their beaches, pubs and cafes for anyone looking to slow down, breathe the air, watch the birds, swim in the sea, or just simply walk along the beach. And who should pay when homeowners lose everything that they have worked and saved for? These are not easy questions, which is why there is no clear answer. But the cost of prevention versus evacuation and loss has to be part of this, and it's one the government must grapple seriously with. Time is not on our side. And in the village of B Sands, just down the coast, this is abundantly clear. The erosion has accelerated rapidly in recent years, where around 80 metres of village green previously separated houses from the sea. Only 9 metres now remain in some areas, with the access road to the village also potentially at risk. Amidst all the trauma of the residents of this special place, I must place on record my sincere gratitude to officers and councillors from South Hams District Council and Devon County Council, who have been outstanding throughout this crisis. But gratitude for them is not enough. These councils are absorbing the cost of emergency repairs, facing potential loss of council tax, business rates and car parking revenue, and doing all of this whilst operating under significant financial pressure with limited central government support mechanisms to draw on. What they need, and what local authorities in coastal communities across England need, is a genuine financial partnership with central government when coastal emergencies strike. The Bellwyn scheme is simply not fit for purpose when it comes to coastal flooding. As the Coastal Protection Authority, South Hams District Council has incurred huge costs since the 2nd of February, including £100,000 for boulders to provide protection in the area that was worst affected. However, they've been informed that only expenditure within 30 days of the event is eligible for reimbursement under the scheme. While I understand that the Bellwyn scheme is intended to support local authorities in their emergency response, in the case of coastal emergencies, it can easily take 30 days just to formulate and implement a plan. The current system asks councils to carry risks and costs that are simply beyond their means to absorb, and that must change. I must also mention the flood recovery framework. The current situation is frankly illogical. The framework provides central government support in cases of severe flooding affecting large areas of England, but weather incidents with localised impacts, however devastating, do not qualify. In Start Bay, the community is in crisis, and the answer for the system is sorry, not enough people were affected. That cannot be right, and I urge the government to reform the framework so that it can respond to severe but localised coastal incidents of exactly this kind. And I want to turn now to the question of insurance, a common theme with my constituents. There is currently no specific insurance product for coastal erosion. Flood Re provides government-backed cover for flood risk, but there is a clear and urgent gap when it comes to erosion. I therefore call on the government to look seriously at implementing a Flood Re-style product for coastal erosion, and I note that a sobering report published by the EFRA Committee last week has made exactly this recommendation. While homeowners in Torcross may be successful in securing insurance payouts to support repairs to their properties on this occasion, it's unclear whether they will be able to obtain new insurance in the future. So I ask the government to provide assurance that those who are affected by coastal erosion and coastal flooding, particularly those whose properties are in areas with coastal protection measures in place that are supposed to work, that they will be supported to access affordable insurance in the future. And it's also crucial that people buying homes near the coast are given the full picture of the coastal erosion risk they face during the conveyancing process, not just to the property itself, but to the surrounding access routes, utilities and insurance availability. Given the climate-induced threats that we now face, these risks must be included as material information in conveyancing. I also want to raise a problem with the way government responds to crises like this. The community impacts of coastal erosion fall primarily to MHCLG, while the physical erosion challenges are overseen by DEFRA. That fragmentation has real human consequences, and it places an additional burden on local authorities who find themselves navigating a confusing and fragmented central government landscape at precisely the moment when they need clarity and support. I want to see DEFRA set out clearly how it recognises and incorporates the full range of the human impact of coastal erosion into policy development and funding decisions, with clear actions and a defined approach to community engagement. The EFRA Committee report called for exactly this, and I endorse that call. And finally, one of the most troubling gaps of all, the complete absence of any national strategy for those who lose their homes to the sea. No one should face the loss of their home to the water and find that the state has nothing to offer them but a place on a housing waiting list for social homes that simply don't exist. The EFRA Committee has recommended that a long-term national strategy providing financial assistance and relocation support should be in place no later than March 2027. I fully support that recommendation and I urge the government to commit to it. So what are my asks? First, funding for the repair of the A379 Slapton line and the improvement of our inland road network. Devon County Council are currently working on a full business case for the Department for Transport, and I urge the government to respond to their application swiftly. Second, funding for sea defences along the Stark Bay coastline. I ask the government to commit that the Environment Agency will have what it needs to respond in an agile and timely manner to coastal emergencies like this one. The process for accessing such funding is incredibly complicated, but speed is of the essence in a situation like this. Third, meaningful, dedicated financial support for local authorities dealing with coastal emergencies, for the cost of emergency repairs, for potential loss of business rates revenue, car parking income, and council tax. Councils are doing extraordinary work in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. They should not be left to carry the financial consequences of a national challenge on their own. Fourth, urgent action on the flood recovery framework to ensure localised weather incidents are treated just as seriously as national events. This is a big problem in a small place, and it needs a big solution. Fifth, a national strategy for households displaced by coastal erosion in place by March 2027. And lastly, a commitment to provide government-backed insurance for coastal erosion and for insurance policy premiums to be capped for those whose properties have been damaged by coastal flooding, such as those in Torcross. I'm very aware that not all these asks are the responsibility of MHCLG, but I hope the Minister will relay these to colleagues in other departments. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to close with a broader point, because while this debate is about Stark Bay, it is also about something much larger. There are communities the length of England's coastline facing versions of what Stark Bay is facing right now. From the Holderness coast in Yorkshire, where land is disappearing into the North Sea faster than almost anywhere else in Europe, to the eroding cliffs of Norfolk and Suffolk, coastal communities are watching the ground literally shift beneath their feet. Many of them are already among the most socially and economically vulnerable in the country, and many feel forgotten. According to the EFRA Committee's report, over 10,000 properties are at risk from coastal erosion in the next 80 years, as well as 183 kilometres of roads and 6 kilometres of railway. If local authorities are to be able to manage the impacts of coastal erosion, they must be supported by the government to carry out long-term strategic planning. What this government does in response to the crisis in Start Bay will be noticed far beyond South Devon. It will send a signal about whether coastal communities can expect a national government to treat their situation with the seriousness it deserves, or whether they will continue to be managed at the margins, left to local authorities and agencies that are doing their very best with nowhere near enough support. The sea does not respect administrative boundaries or departmental silos or funding formula designed for a different kind of emergency. It requires a response that is strategic, sustained, and genuinely cross-governmental. The EFRA Committee has provided a roadmap. The communities of Start Bay have provided the urgent human case. What is needed now is the political will to act. The people of Torcross, Bee Sands, Hall Sands and the wider Start Bay are not asking for the sea to be stopped. They're asking for a government that sees them, that invests in them and that works with them to find a way forward. They are proud and resilient communities that deserve a response equal to the challenge they face, and so do coastal communities the length and breadth of this country. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am grateful to the Honourable Member for South Devon for securing this important debate. May I start by saying that the Government absolutely understands and sympathises with those impacted by coastal erosion in Start Bay. I was hugely saddened to see the impacts that the recent storms have had on the Honourable Member's constituents and communities. And the Government is committed to supporting both her communities and all coastal communities because we understand and appreciate the urgency of the issue and the huge impact it is having. Let me start by reiterating that coastal communities are a vital part of our national identity, serving as a reminder of our national pride and shared maritime story. We know we must do more to both protect and preserve these communities against the vulnerabilities that they face with coastal erosion. That's why between 2024 and March 2026, around £609 million has been invested in the protection from sea flooding, tidal flooding and coastal erosion. And it is also why in October last year, the Government announced major changes to its flood and coastal erosion funding policy. This reform, which will take place this April, will make it quicker and easier to deliver the right flood and coastal defences in the right places by simplifying our rules. And most recently in January, we announced the 30 million coastal adaptation pilots, 12 million of which will be made available across England to deliver adaptation action in areas affected by coastal erosion. These pilots will help communities take practical steps to prepare for coastal change, from relocating vulnerable community buildings to strengthening local infrastructure, such as beach access and coastal tourism facilities. And the insights from these pilots will be applied across all coastal communities as they adapt to coastal change. I know that the Honourable Member is rightly concerned about the communities in her constituency. We know that residents are concerned in Torcross by the recent flooding, the wave overtopping and the structural vibrations affecting some properties. As the Honourable Member has pointed out, the Environment Agency has done a huge amount of work in the area, and early investigations are clear that the defences remain structurally sound, but we will continue keeping this under review. And the feasibility of further defence work at Torcross is currently being assessed by the Environment Agency, and we expect the initial benefit cost analysis findings to emerge shortly. And future schemes will, of course, depend on developing a full and detailed business case and securing the necessary funding, which the Department is committed to doing. I want to reassure residents that this... I will give way.
Would she accept that in such a cost-benefit analysis that also has, maybe she could advise me if this is already the case, that the cost of doing nothing is also a cost, because the cost of moving an entire community and all the impact that has socially and economically is possibly much more than the cost of improving defences so that they can stay put.
Thank you to the Honourable Lady. And look, we are very alive to the cost of inaction, not just in the context of coastal erosion, but in the context of climate change more broadly. And we are very clear that we need to take robust action to both prevent, but also to adapt and build our resilience to the change that is coming. My colleagues in DEFRA are very clear and working very closely with both the Environment Agency, but with communities as well, to ensure that we are responding in the right way. It is worth saying and reassuring residents that this process of looking at how we bolster our defences is underway, and it is one that we are taking seriously. It is, in addition to the work that DEFRA are doing, and I will take away the asks that the Honourable Member has set out. She will know that many of them sit with my colleagues over at DEFRA, not us at MHCLG, but we are working closely because, as she says, the boundaries don't stop at DEFRA. We absolutely need to work in lockstep. But I will make sure that we relay all of those asks and that we ask the relevant minister to both respond to her, but potentially put in a meeting as well to discuss the particular issues in her area. I wanted also to mention that alongside the critical issue of coastal erosion, which we recognise and which I hope she takes reassurance that we are taking seriously and we understand that we need to act, we are also very clear that we need to continue investing and supporting our coastal communities. And that is both to ensure that we are investing in the areas that are under pressure, but making sure that we are putting vital assets into retaining both the heritage, but also life and opportunities in our coastal communities. And this is why we have put in place Pride in Place funding across many of our coastal communities. At least 56 coastal communities across the UK will receive over £1 billion through Pride in Place programme over the next decade. And this will be targeted at both regeneration, but fundamentally will be targeted at investing in the priorities of the local community. And many of them will be thinking about the infrastructure that they have and the investment in that infrastructure in order to preserve their communities. We are also clear that it will champion local leadership, foster community engagement and strengthen cohesion. And for me, this is important because we must absolutely do the job of protecting and insulating against the change that is coming, but we must also make sure that we are investing and bolstering our communities so they continue being thriving, vibrant places. In conclusion, would like to thank the Honourable Member once again for raising this important debate. I would like to reassure her that we will raise the points that she has made with our colleagues across DEFRA, but also to reassure her that we will absolutely do our part to make sure that we are working so that we are both building communities that are resilient and supporting those communities as they go through a very difficult transition as they adapt to the changes that are coming. We will continue doing our bit to support coastal communities. It is important that honourable members like herself continue raising the case for coastal communities.
Before the Minister winds up, one of the things that came out in conversations I was having today is the complication of, in a coastal environment like this at Torcross, of having assets that are owned by the Environment Agency and then assets that are owned such as the road, by the council, and then third-party assets might be there as well, you know, quayside walls or other infrastructure. And the complication of managing that and all the different agencies that are involved, alongside the complication of MHCLG and DEFRA and transport all having to work together, would suggest that perhaps we're reaching the point where the government might need to think about an office for climate change events or something. I don't know what you would call it, but someone who can bring all those things together and have an oversight, because it is incredibly complicated to navigate this patchwork landscape of responsibility.
The honourable member is very right. We are acutely aware that the landscape is incredibly complex and has evolved over time. What we are trying to do is both local authority level, but increasingly as we're trying to build up the structure at regional level, is allow far greater coordination so that ultimately the priorities of the local area can come together, can be coordinated, and critically we as departments, rather than working in silo, are working with one voice in lockstep with the community. I will come back to the point I've sort of made consistently. This is an urgent issue. We are hugely aware of the impacts on our coastal communities. We are very aware of the need for us to work across our departmental silos and with the Environment Agency and with the local authorities in order to respond. And there is an absolute commitment on all of our parts in order to do that for the very reasons that the honourable member has set out. This is having a huge, profound impact on communities. If we do not get it right, if we do not adapt, if we do not build resilience, if we do not build the infrastructure, there will be communities that will fall into the sea, and that is an unconscionable outcome. So I hope she is reassured that we are trying to work across boundaries. I hope she'll take that I will make sure that I'm passing this on to my colleagues in DEFRA who hold some of the levers, but there is a commitment for us to work alongside them to make sure that we are supporting our coastal communities so that they are not just protected but critically can thrive.